Good afternoon, everyone. For the record, my name is Tanya Fernandez Anderson, the District 7 City Council. I am the chair of Boston City Council Committee on Ways and Means. This hearing is being recorded and is being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-TV. That's boston.gov/CITY-COUNCIL-TV, and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and Fios Channel 964. We will be taking public testimony at the end of this hearing, if any are available. If you are here with us in the chamber, I don't think there's anyone here. Please sign up at a sign-in sheet. If you are interested in testifying virtually, please email ccc.wm@boston.gov for the link. For all testimony, please state your name and neighborhood and affiliation, and try to keep your comments to 2 minutes. Today's hearing is on docket number 0463, message and order for your approval, an order authorizing the City of Boston to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority 2 statements of interest. And docket number 0464, message and order for your approval, a revised order authorizing the City of Boston to submit to Massachusetts School Building Authority statements of interest for its accelerated repair program for the following schools: Haley Pilot School, Curley K-8 School, Lower Building, Burke High School, Henderson K-12, Inclusion School Upper Campus, Ohrenberger School, and English High School. Today, I am not joined here by my colleagues, but I do have one council colleague who sent her statement for the records, and I will read them now. Councilor Mejia states, "Dear Madam Chair and members of the Ways and Means, I am writing to inform you of my absence during today's City Council hearing on docket 0463, 0465, a hearing regarding statements of interest to be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority. Due to a scheduling conflict, I am unable to attend. A representative from my staff will be listening in and following up with me. I look forward to reviewing the footage and following up as needed. Sincerely, Councilor Mejia." Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Today, our panelists for today's hearing, I have Carrie Griffin, Director of Public Facilities Department. Hi, Carrie. Morgan McDaniel, Public Facilities Deputy Chief of Operations, but you are not joining us as a panelist? Be a panelist. All right. Thank you. David Bloom, BPS Deputy Chief Financial Officer. Hi. Indy Alvarez, BPS Chief Operations Officer. And hi, Ms. Alvarez. Teresa Neff Webster, Deputy Chief of Operations. Okay. Sorry, sir. Can I have your name for the record?
Absolutely. My name is Brian Ford Jr. I'm the Executive Director of BPS Facilities.
Thank you. And I will now turn to the floor to the panelists. If you would like to, is anyone here from the administration? Here from Ms. Carey, Director of Public Facilities Department. Sorry, I will turn it to the administration. Then we can go to the rest of the panelists. Then to questions. Before we do that, I just wanted to address that we've been joined by my councilor colleague, President Council Ed Flynn. And Ms. Carey, you can take it away.
Both for BPS, they're doing their submission for the MSBA. And I'm here just if there are any questions on the capital plan or the MSBA process. After the statements of interest are submitted, then if they're approved by the MSBA, then my department takes the project over once it actually becomes a project. So I'm going to turn it over to David.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Griffin, for that clarification. Yeah, David, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Counselor, and thank you.
Sorry, I always have to get used to hearing my own voice. Thank you, everyone who's watching at home. We've prepared some short remarks about our MSBA Statement of Interest submission, specifically about the core program, which is the main focus of today's hearing, to my understanding. So we start with what our students, our families, and our staff deserve, which is equitable access to excellent buildings, as well as predictability and transparency. That really grounds our work in the presentation you're seeing today. The core of the presentation is about the Massachusetts School Building Authority. We work at BPS to leverage state funding for capital projects through the said authority, the MSBA, through two programs. First, the core program, which covers extensive repairs to buildings, including renovations, additions, and new school construction, as well as the accelerated repair program, projects covering repair or replacement of roofs, doors and windows, boilers, and an otherwise structurally sound facility. We're here today proposing two projects to the MSBA through their statement of interest process, which I will go through in a little bit more detail shortly. One for the Blackstone School, and the second for the Otis School, specifically regard to the city parcel on Paris Street, very close to the Otis building. We're also here for slightly amended orders on the accelerated repair program, which you reviewed last month. In our discussion and finalization of those accelerated repair program submissions, we realized that we didn't quite meet the criteria for the Warren Prescott submission, so we ultimately did not end up submitting that statement of interest, and we had to make some minor adjustments to one of the other statements. So the order, the revised order you see reflects what we've submitted to the MSBA and what we would like to move forward through those repairs. Like it says at the top of the slide in your packet, we've been approved for approximately $206 million since 2015. Now you'll notice on the next page there's some additional information about how that breaks out. The most recent portion of the accelerated repairs is the 2021 cycle. While we have been approved for 4 projects through that cycle, we have not yet been approved for funding. This is not a problem, but standard practice. We have not yet reached that point in the cycle. Once we do get approved for funding by the MSBA for those projects, we will be able to come back to this body and give an update on the additional funding for that, and you will be given information about that as well. So the Massachusetts School Building Authority grant program for school building construction and renovation is a non-entitlement competitive program. We have no guarantee for the funding, but we of course are very interested, and the MSBA have been very good partners to us over the years. The MSBA reviews applications from cities and towns across the Commonwealth for urgency and need, and then invites a district to participate in their grant program. Once we are invited, which we hope to be with at least one of these projects, the district and the MSBA work together, in our case, in close collaboration with Carrie and the Public Facilities Department, in the collaborative process that's outlined above. And this comes directly from the MSBA. This is their process. So the two projects we're here bringing before you today for the first time are the Blackstone and the Otis Street. At the Blackstone, oops. So we could go to the next slide, if that's possible. I might not be using this correctly, I'm sorry. At the Blackstone, oh, thank you so much. At the Blackstone, there are a couple of issues that are causing us to submit this statement of interest. First, there is overcrowding as we expand into 6th grade at the building. They all fit within the Blackstone building and the BCYF building next door, but is not making optimal usage of the school space. Second, we know that there are issues with the interior learning conditions at the Blackstone. Specifically, they're our last remaining open learning school after the closure of the Jackson Man, and there is a need to create better internal learning conditions for students at that school. Finally, there are a number of general building systems that could be that are in use of an upgrade or an update that would be leveraged alongside these first two items. In the Otis building, the school building at the Otis is at its full capacity. They are using every nook and cranny of the space in that building to ensure that kids are getting everything they need. But in addition to the expansion of 6th grade, the spaces in that building are not ideal for 21st century learning. And we think through this MSBA process, through expansion into a 2-site facility between their existing building and the Paris Street lot, we'll be able to get the students the learning environments that they deserve. One additional note about this, the MSBA requires that every city or town submits a priority project to the MSBA, and we have listed the Blackstone Core program as our priority statement of interest. The Massachusetts School Building Authority process takes place over an extended time period. So the first thing we're doing right now, and sorry, next slide, please. Oh, nope, maybe I don't know if I did that or someone else did, but thank you. Is what we're doing right now, which is both the City Council and the School Committee vote to approve the submission of a statement of interest to the MSBA. We've already submitted our accelerated repair program SOIs, and the core SOIs are due on by April 29th. I apologize for that slightly outdated language there. This is us returning to the council. Over the course of the summer and fall, the MSBA will review the statements of interest submitted from across the Commonwealth. At some point in the late fall of 2022, perhaps running into the early winter of 2023, the MSBA will make decisions on both the accelerated repair program and core program and invite districts to participate. And with that, I'll turn it over to the council for questions you have.
All right, thank you, David. I just wanted to address that my council colleague, we've been joined by council colleague Bach, and we also got a letter submission from council colleague Ruzi Lujan, and I just have to read this into the record, and my apologies, and then we'll go into questioning. Dear Committee on Ways and Means, I regret to inform you that I will be unable to attend the meeting for the Committees on Ways and Means to discuss the Massachusetts State Building Authority Statement of Interest Docket 0464 and 0643. The MSBA Accelerated Grant Repair Program is vital to the Boston Public Schools and its infrastructure. Thank you for your diligence and timely hearing on this important matter. My staff will be attending, and I will thoroughly review the video, hearing minutes, and public testimony. Should you or any member of the public have any questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to reach out to my office directly, 617-635-4376, or at ruzi.lujan@boston.gov. Sincerely, Councilor Lujan. Thank you. I think I can turn to my council colleagues for a statement or questions, and then we can return to the panel. Thank you. Councilor Flynn, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the panelists for being here today and for the important work you're doing in the city as well. So on the two dockets, 0463 and 0464. So 0463 would be the Blackstone School, and what's the second school?
The Otis School.
The Otis School, okay. And then 0464 would be the accelerated repair program for those other schools. What are the challenges the other schools are having so that they're able to benefit from the accelerated repair program? What structural issues are they having?
So at each school, there are slightly different issues, as you might imagine. So at the Haley Pilot School, it's a replacement of an old boiler, significantly beyond the life expectancy of the boiler. Similar at the Curley School. At the Burke, it's actually 2 boilers. They have 3 at the school. One of them was replaced somewhat recently as a part of a renovation, and the other 2 now need to be replaced. It's then the roof at the Henderson upper school, the roof at the Ohrenberger School, and then the roof and windows at the English.
Thank you. And can you tell me the Blackstone and Otis, what are your plans for both of those schools?
The Blackstone School is, giving the school community a up-to-date 21st century K-6 school building environment. Through the MSBA process, we will understand more about what that exactly looks like, be it a major renovation, new construction, or other thing. For the Otis, it's a similar goal, but the process will be slightly different in that the city has already acquired a parcel at Paris Street, just down the street from the Otis, for an expanded K-6 21st century site at that school as well.
Thank you. I've been into the Blackstone many times, and it's a wonderful school community, certainly with many wonderful families there. I know they have a large number of students from East Boston, large Latinx community, many students, residents from Villa Victoria, in and around that neighborhood. I was over there yesterday, over the weekend actually. So I'm glad that that school is the issues at that school are going to be addressed. I know every time I went over there, the students would always ask me about the school library at the Blackstone. So you envision a brand new school at the Blackstone, right?
Yes. Exactly what that looks like will be determined through the MSBA process, but for all intents and purposes, yeah.
On the same site.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. That's the short answer.
Now, that's something I would support. I think it would be a tremendous asset for the residents of Boston, for the South End, for students in the South End, East Boston, many of them from public housing, Cathedral, Villa Victoria, into Roxbury, into the Lenox area. What would that look like in terms of the construction? Would you shut down the Blackstone School, establish a kind of a satellite school, and then bring the students back?
Thank you, Council, for the question. Yes, we would actually we would first develop a swing space for the children of this Blackstone School, because they would not, once we're in, if this gets accepted into the program, this school, we would develop the first step is a feasibility study. So we would look at is it worth salvaging the building and gutting it completely or tearing down? And then based on that, either option is going to require the children to have to go to a swing space, which we will work with BPS to develop what's the best location in the school community.
Thank you, Kerry. So what would the relationship be with the, I know the BCYF team provides a lot of services to the youth in the South End. What would the relationship be with the ongoing construction? How would we get the youth of the South End so that they can still play sports, they can do their activities, but the BCYF in the South End, at the Blackstone rather, plays a critical role. So what would that relationship be like, or support would you provide the young people of the South End and Roxbury, because it's kind of right on the border a little bit, just down the road a little bit from Roxbury. So how would that relationship be?
Thank you for that question, Counselor. The one thing that we are discussing on a regular basis is the relationship between BPS and the city in general. And the intention is that every plan that we make, we incorporate the BCYF community in our decision making. They are part of the process, and we're starting meetings and discussions with them as well, so that everyone understands that this is one community that's serving a lot of the same families, and they are part of the process.
Okay.
The BPS process in the process, yep.
Yeah, that's an important relationship, is BPS and BCYF in making sure that, you know, kids are connected from school to after-school programs, whether it's academic assistance, tutoring, or it's sports, or it's computer assistance. So one of the things I've been focused on, I'm actually filing a hearing order with Councilor Lara next week, but, you know, making sure that our BCYF facilities, the swimming pools are operational. You know, kids have access to swimming lessons, especially students of color and immigrant kids as well. So you're going to make sure that those programs at the Blackstone are also, they also stay in the neighborhood as well?
Yes, we will be working definitely with the community, because it's for us, this is very important to make sure that relationship is intact and to make sure the services are intact as well. So the swimming and the sports and a number of other things that you've mentioned, we have already started conversations with BCYF, and we will continue building that relationship to make sure that we're all on the same page and providing the services we need to provide.
Okay, and I know myself and Councilor Fernandez-Anderson share that area. So would love to be part of that discussion at the very earliest stage of the discussion to make sure that the voices of our constituents are heard. So I just want to say thank you to the administration team that's here today in the work that you're doing. Thank you, Councilor Fernandez-Anderson.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Bach?
Thanks so much, Madam Chair. And thanks so much to the panel for being here today. And I apologize for arriving late, but I did review the presentation. So I wanted to ask a couple of questions, starting out with the accelerated repair program, and then I'll move to core program. So on the ARP, you guys filed a version of this docket on March 9th that the council passed, and then you filed a resubmitted docket. And to my reading, the things that have changed is that the Warren Prescott's been removed altogether, the Curley, the roof was removed, and at the Henderson, the boilers were removed. So I guess one question is, am I right in my one-to-one comparison? And then can you give us the story of what happened there? And also, because I know that these statements of interest have already been submitted to the MSBA, did we submit the original one, or did we submit the corrected one, and now you're sort of retroactively getting council approval for it, or what's the state of that?
So the
once we did a little more digging in, the school department realized that for the Warren Prescott, that it did not meet the criteria in terms of the age. So that was corrected. What we did is we sent in a letter to the MSBA stating, we made these mistakes, we've identified them, we're going to correct them, and present to the council the mistakes that were made in terms of the boiler at the Henderson was done in a previous ARP project, 2018, as was the Curley that was done in 2019, I believe, ARP. So both of them were submitted in error as part of the list, and I think, you know.
And I'll just add, as someone who had a hand in that error, the intention, which my sincere apologies for not getting it across correctly, was to for the two that you mentioned that besides the Warren Prescott, was to reference the recent MSBA projects that had happened at those schools. But instead it came across as requesting to do those MSBA projects. So for the Henderson, we had just done the boiler. And so I wanted to reference, we're asking for permission to do the roof, and we've just done the boiler, but instead it came across as a request to do both. So this is a clarification of those two.
Got it. So I guess I would just say, and this is something that I expressed myself on in the council meeting on the 16th of March, but you guys aren't in the council meetings, that from my perspective, this error would have been caught if the docket had been submitted with sufficient time for the council to hold this hearing prior to the deadline for the statement of interest. And in fact, although council hearings can often seem like an irritation and a sort of checkbox thing, there actually is a fairly decent quality control aspect to having to come and talk about these things. And I know that it was my frustration previously when I was the chair of Ways and Means that on a number of occasions, we would only get things from BPS immediately before the MSBA deadlines. And I think that, you know, obviously everyone in the council is united with the Boston Public Schools in wanting to get as much state reimbursement money as we possibly can, but to make every deadline a fire drill such that there isn't the opportunity for appropriate oversight, I think we see in this revised docket exactly why it's not an acceptable MO. So I just really want to stress that this is not the first time. This has happened repeatedly, and I've only been on the council for 2.5 years. So I don't know what steps you guys are taking to try to back up your own processes such that you're giving this body the appropriate respect of the amount of time in advance that it needs to review the dockets. I don't know if anyone can speak to that.
So, let me start off by honestly apologizing because it is inappropriate to not give enough time to make sure that the City Council has the appropriate time to go ahead and review. I do have officially a year now at BPS, and one of the things that I've talked to staff on a regular basis is the importance of building a relationship and making sure that we start that building of that relationship will definitely help us create a process in place to be back and forth. I do agree that we do need to give you plenty of time so that this is avoided. This is embarrassing, and I'll be honest, this is really embarrassing to come here and apologize to a mistake that we made. We did have a lot of conversations afterwards with the CFO's office and CO office, and one of the main things that came up was we cannot have this happening to us again, and how do we improve our internal communication in order for us to be able to present these things in a timely manner. The only thing I could do at this time is definitely apologize again, and honestly, we are sorry for this mistake, but then working very hard in improving our processes internally so that we're able to do this the right way.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that, and I think, like, yeah, it's just a question of backing out.
Yeah.
I think if what everyone has circled on their calendars are the MSBA deadlines, then we're always going to get this squish, right? So I think trying to be mindful of, oh, actually, we need some padding. Because, I mean, similarly, right, this hearing is, I mean, fortunately, the chair managed to fit it in, but it's really happening, like, right when it has to, because our last council meeting before the 29th is the 27th, right? So it's just, it would be good to have a little more breathing room so that we can consider this properly.
I want to add, sorry.
Can I add, Councilor Morgan McDaniel, Deputy Chief operations under Chief Irish. I just want to add to what Indy said that, my position is new. I started a couple weeks ago, and I'm really looking forward to working in very close collaboration with BPS operations and finance and with Carrie at PFD. I think we're on our way in the next year to working much more closely together, having better lines of communication in all directions to address exactly the issue that you've raised.
Great. No, I'm glad to hear it, and congratulations on the new position, coming down from the 9th floor. Are you still on 9?
I'm on 6 now.
There, you're welcome. And then I wondered if you guys could speak to, a thing that we've always been mindful of on the accelerated repair program is the fact that when we invest the state money in, it means that we really need to continue using the buildings for 20 years as schools. And so we wouldn't want to, for instance, be putting ARP money into a building like the Blackstone, which, as you were discussing with my colleague, the intention is to replace. So I just wonder, and I always have this hesitation and concern that, it's my view, and I know the people sitting in this room intend to change this, but that real long-range capital planning has not been a strength of the Boston Public Schools. And so it worries me that we might, be putting money into buildings that when we then get around to looking at them a couple of years later, we're like, oh, psych, actually, we want to, replace this building altogether, and then we're going to find that a lot of the financial benefit to using the state money goes up in smoke. So I just wonder if you guys could speak to me about, when we're talking about the Haley, the Curley, the Burke, the Henderson, the Ohrenberger, and the English, our sort of confidence that those are not buildings that we're replacing in that 20-year period.
I could say that they're not buildings that we're replacing in the 20-year. We're really careful about selecting the buildings that we have no intentions of closing on, just to make sure that we improve them on a regular basis. But I can only say that we have no intention. I don't know if David wants to add to it, but so go ahead.
Hi, Brian Ford, Executive Director of the Facilities Department. So I just want to add a few of the schools here. We are actually making ongoing maintenance and improvement items in here. They're not capital related. So the Curley has a very sensitive community, and so we continue to provide additional classrooms that suit the IEPs in the building. English High School right now is going through an expansion project where we're going to add in additional classrooms so that they can expand into more grade levels. And there's even talks around more improvements around their sports facilities as well, so they can have more there. And similar conversations around the Burke and the Haley as well, where there's ongoing maintenance that we don't want to lose the building.
Got it. We've been typically getting what, 2 or 3 a year from the MSBA? 4. 4 in the most recent cycle. Okay. And in terms of, I think there's probably a gut instinct thing where people might ask, why do we not have more Windows projects? Just because Windows and BPS Windows in general became such a focus of our ventilation challenges in the last 2 years. I don't know if anybody can speak to that, since I think it's just English that we're proposing a Windows project at.
Are we talking about the Windows project from a couple of years during COVID? I don't understand it.
Well, no, it's so if ARP can do 3 types of things, boilers, roofs, and windows, there's some world in which it wouldn't be a crazy thought, why not propose 6 Windows projects, from the perspective of kind of how crucial Windows ended up being.
Right.
So I'm just curious if, what kind of drives the selection of boilers versus roofs versus windows? For
us, boilers are in some ways a sort of MSBA easier win. It's something that fits very clearly into their mandate and guidance, something we know we've gotten a lot of approval on before, and something where, in the case of the boilers that are before you, we have a really good case for replacement, shall we say. And then I think for roofs, these are often really high ROI projects. It's a very expensive project, but we can also see potential overlap with other city initiatives. So if a school building has a new roof, then you can start to think more about solar panels and some of the other things that we're thinking about for our buildings. I think windows and air quality has been something that we've been investing a lot of money in through our traditional capital and also through ESSER dollars. And so I think that's sort of the priority that you're seeing reflected here today.
And then on the core program, I feel as though we ought to address in this hearing what it is that we think caused us not to get the Horace Mann approved for, because that was obviously our core program sort of bid last year. And I know that in the article I read in the Globe, it indicated that, like, you know, one comment made was, oh, well, we didn't say it was utmost priority. We sort of put it at the second level of priority or something. But I just wonder if you could speak to us, because obviously, like, again, with the Paris and the Otis, we would hope to have our proposal succeed. We've been really fortunate. I'm very pleased in my district that, you know, BAA is on track to open in September, and obviously there's a huge amount of state money that's gone into that, and it is, you know, obviously we just can't fit as many of these school projects in if we don't get the state core program support in terms of our capital capacity. So I'm kind of curious what we think went wrong with the Horace Mann proposal, and how we feel confident that at least the priority project of the Paris would have the utmost prospect of success.
I think in the case of the Blackstone, which is our
is
first
your priority.
Yeah. As we were doing the review of, sorry for the confusing language I have to use here, but the MSBA has two different priority things. First is your priority project, which is the Blackstone. And the second is then they have a series of listed priorities that you are applying under. And as we looked at the Blackstone School, we found that there were a number of priorities that they fit under, overcrowding, building conditions and such, and sort of modernization of facility. So we are applying under multiple priorities, which is allowed through the MSBA, and really ensuring that we're able to clearly document how that school community would benefit from and is really eligible for this full investment. We're excited to partner with this body and with the mayor's office and others in doing the advocacy through the MSBA process, through their board meetings and such, when we have the opportunity to share why this is such an important project for Boston.
So, and
So
that,
Bob,
go ahead.
just one more question.
Yeah, just that category, replacement or renovation of a building which is structurally unsound or otherwise in a condition seriously jeopardizing the health and safety of school children, which I think is like so, right, like, but I guess, I think we've got folks wondering, since obviously we had to close the Jackson Mann as a physical facility, why we weren't able to check that box for them and instead sort of checked a modernizing the facility box for that one.
The way the Horace Mann was submitted was under a priority setting, which, you know, on a list of priorities, that's not seen as a high priority. Again, without speaking for other agencies, but one would be obviously, as you just stated, due to the building condition. Yeah, I think in general it was because I think that probably needs a campus solution, because there also is, even if we were to get money for the Horace Mann into that program, it gets convoluted because you have the community center and you also have the Jackson Mann. So I think because the way the priority listing didn't meet that.
But then would you say that knowing what we know now, we should not have submitted the Horace Mann in the way that we did to maximize its chances of being, because obviously we also therefore forewent. There's both the question of could we have framed it better to get the Horace Mann approved, and there's the question of if we couldn't have, should we have proposed a different core facility? Like, I'm just trying to think about, you guys you've got a new team, you're thinking about the interagency aspects of this, how to make sure we've set ourselves up for the best prospects, and this seems like a potential learning experience, so I'm just trying to understand what we think went awry there.
Thank you, Council Bach. Please answer, and then we'll move on. If we can
Okay.
do a second round, I
Sure.
have some questions, and then we can get back to Councilor Bach if she has
Okay.
more questions.
I just would say that I agree, Counselor, that it should not have been submitted, in my opinion. And I think it's a learning opportunity for how we submit further.
Thank you. Sorry, can we take a step back a little bit and just, can you please explain the selection process? How do you, in terms of priorities, what's a priority, what's not a priority? Let's define that for those at home, or just so that we're in full understanding how this works.
The selection process in terms of how,
Yeah.
go ahead and then I'll talk.
Okay, great. Sorry. So for the MSBA project, we look at the conditions of all of our buildings before we've decided whether a project would be submitted through the accelerated repair or the core program, and think about what meets the criteria outlined by the MSBA for their different programs.
Can you explain the MSBA first?
Oh, sorry, thank you. The MSBA is the Massachusetts School Building Authority. It's a statewide agency that works with cities and towns across the Commonwealth on a variety of school building projects. Part of the idea behind the MSBA is it provides expertise on school building construction as well as funding, especially for cities and towns that have fewer schools and might not be doing a school building construction project as often as a city like Boston.
When do you get notice? How do you know when to submit?
So the MSBA runs an annual submission process. The last couple of years were slightly disrupted by COVID, but this year they opened their statement of interest process in late January. So there's a sort of window where you're allowed to submit starting in late January. The deadline for the accelerated repair program is at the end of March, and then the deadline for the core program is at the end of April.
Okay, thank you. Can you continue to explain the selection process?
Of course. I will in a moment turn it over to
Indy?
my colleague to talk about the facilities condition assessment that's ongoing. But we currently have a sort of listing or understanding of the conditions of our current buildings and the age, our best understanding of the age in which each system was last updated. That we look at that information combined with the Opportunity Index, which is a BPS-generated index of school community need based on a variety of factors about the students and the neighborhoods that send students to the school that's impacted, to look at the sort of overall need of the building and priority for whatever either repair or replacement or other things. For a accelerated repair project, we're looking for schools that score as needy on a particular individual item as outlined by the MSBA, but who are not so needy across the board that they might be in need of replacement recently. For the core program, we're looking at buildings that have multiple issues that are leading to, we think, essentially a new building, whether it's a major renovation or a knockdown rebuild.
Councilor Buck mentioned this, but I didn't really hear the answer to it. If you know that your selection process is ongoing, you know the schools, you have the inventory, then you know where things are. You must have some sort of monitoring system where you know that things are coming up. What is the possibility or probability of you thinking about a long-term capital plan?
So, and I'm going to, between myself, Brian, and possibly Morgan, respond to that, because my voice tends to go in and out. One of the things that we did in the last several months is that we literally decided with the operations team and facilities team come together and did an inventory of every single one of our buildings and did an internal assessment of what we currently have and what are the conditions of all of our buildings. We have it took us several months to do this because there wasn't really one place in BPS where we could actually find where these things lie. And the other thing that we did is that we decided to hire all of the necessary key people, whether they're engineers or what have you, to make sure that we're able to have a list that makes sense. But other than that, the industry standard is to have a facilities condition assessment, something that BPS did not have. It hasn't had one ever. And we put out an RFP and decided we got a vendor to start the process where that vendor is going to come into every single one of our buildings and do an assessment from the boiler to the roof to the walls, the size of the rooms, and how we're using those spaces on a regular basis. It does take about 12 to 18 months to give us a real full assessment that we have not had.
You've contracted someone already?
Yes, ma'am.
And, okay, where are you now? How long has that been?
We've had our first meeting with our vendors this past, I gotta figure out we're on Tuesday, last week.
Mr. Ford?
Good afternoon. So actually this morning, they are in schools right now starting, which is an update as of very much today.
So you are thinking about this overall?
Yes, and that's one of the things I was gonna do is, my colleague was explaining, this is something that we are thinking overall in terms of what exactly do we have for our buildings and the conditions of them and who's out there and what is the industry standard. But the other thing that we're taking very seriously is our relationship with the city COO's office and PFD, and we work together as one team to do this. This is not BPS trying to take on this 132 buildings all by themselves, but rather do this as a collaboration with our city partners and making sure that we do this in a collaborative way that makes the best sense and that we're providing the best services for our students.
How are you engaging the council in?
I'm sorry, say it again.
How are you engaging the council administration in terms of input of that process in itself? You want to work with the council closer. You
Yes.
want to work with administration in order to do this. How are you involving or including the council or administration with input about the process in itself?
So part of the relationship is going ahead and working with our IGR team, and one of them were in here a couple of minutes ago, and making sure that information is passed on to the council. But I do welcome any input on how we can do this better, Councilor. But at this time, it's one of the things that I do depend highly on the IGR team that we have at BPS to make sure that we're touching all the different bases and having meetings on a constant basis with our partners. But it is one of those things that we were so excited about getting it together and getting it in place that if I skip any steps, I'm going to apologize again, but I'll make sure that you are involved, not you as one person, but the entity, the city council is involved in that process as well. Go ahead.
On May 31st, we are going to be presenting some of the information that we have to the council.
Okay.
So that we can create more transparency. I did want to add some information just for perspective on the whole MSBA process. As we get to some of the guidelines on the process where there's age requirements for windows or boilers or roofs, a lot of the time for submission puts us at reviewing an out-of-date piece of the building that could be needing assistance right away. So we're looking at a boiler that's 20 years old that might not meet MSBA regulations for replacing, and so we'll do it, which will then disqualify it from the MSBA. In addition to that, something that does meet qualifications as a 30-year-old boiler, by the time the proposal is ready, it's something we've got to act on to make sure students have heat. And in addition to that, gathering all the information of the older windows, of the older boilers and roofs that wasn't documented the best in the past, as we get all these MSBA submissions ready and continue to work on this ever-evolving situation, which is where the FCA gives us this index to work with that is up to date and helps us form a better plan overall.
Sounds like you've started that process, and hopefully it's going to inform moving forward, right, to prevent these last minute. And I don't want you to be embarrassed. I thank you for your graciousness in apologizing. Council Bach is absolutely correct. A lot of councilors did express similar sentiments about the late filing. I did want to touch a little bit on what Councilor Flynn mentioned about engagement with the community and how you are setting up the students while they're out. If you haven't located a place, how are you engaging community in this process as well?
If we get accepted into the MSBA program, this is more on the core side, we have a robust community process, and that's with the school community, the local community, anyone's invited, but we do a lot of outreach with our partners at NOS and IGR, and that's very much a staple of how we conduct pretty much all of our projects, whether it's a study or feasibility study or it's an actual design project. Community input is vital to our process. So we will, and just as the Indy and her team are doing the facilities assessment, we're also, Public Facilities is doing a K through 6 and a 7 through 12 programming and siting study, and looking at developing a K through 6 standard program and a 7 through 12 standard program. As part of that, we will do some siting, and the facilities assessment will help complement that, because if it ends up being that, you know, we're going to spend X amount of dollars on renovating a building, it might be more fiscally responsible to demo the building. So, you know, I think over the last 6 months, we've been working very hard to improve communication and the relationship with all partners and stakeholders, so.
And families.
And families, thank you.
Thank you. I'll just ask one more question. I do have more, but I'm quite sure my colleagues have some as well. So what is the timeline for each project that you have here?
Essentially, it's going to, when we do the MSBA process, whether it's core or ARP, it adds about another 9 to 12 months, because we won't know if we're accepted into the program until the end of this year. I think it's 220 days is what they say. Might be a little more than that, because, I mean, if they have over 350 districts that apply to this program, school districts, so they have to go through and look at all of them. And, you know, I don't know how many projects were they received this year for the ARP, but or the core. So, yeah, it takes about 9 to 12 months longer to do this type of process.
Okay, thank you. I'll now turn to my council colleagues if they have any further questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any further questions. I don't have any further questions. I just want to thank the panelists for being here, for their important work they're doing. I certainly support these projects. Blackstone is a critical program, critical school, does tremendous work in our neighborhood, and I know the Otis does as well. So I certainly support both the Blackstone and Otis and the other projects as well. And I think it's this reimbursement from the state Mass School building is a tremendous opportunity. I'm glad we're participating in it. So I just want to say thank you for the team that's working here and working with us. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Council Flynn. Council Bach, you have the floor.
I wanted to ask if, and this is a repeat question from past hearings on this, I don't think, well, Carlton's obviously not with us today, but if he were, he would be expecting this question from me, which is that it's long struck me that with the ARP program, because it's kind of the same type of project over and over again, right? It's like roofs and windows and boilers. And we all know, maybe our facilities director here most of all, that we have like roofs, windows, and boilers till kingdom come in BPS, right? Which need replacing and repairing. And so I find myself wondering, you know, when we talk about the persistently low, contract ratios that go to firms owned by people of color in the city of Boston. When we think about our struggles on the Boston resident jobs policy, et cetera, it's always struck me that it feels like a place where the city could potentially partner with some firms to really drive a pipeline, because I think we all kind of know that giant school building projects are likely to go to one of the largest and most sophisticated building contractors in town, just because the nature of those projects is there's a million different things that change and only so many people have all the subs and competencies and whatever to compete for those contracts. But it feels like we could have a great school window replacer, in Roxbury. I mean, I know specifically the windows we then send away for someone else to make them far, far away. It also feels like we could have a flipping window factory, but it seems to me like a place, as we look at procurement strategies and kind of how the city can be proactive about creating an ecosystem which we can then contract with. This is this super predictable stream where we know we're going to keep doing capital projects in these three categories and getting some state support, and it just feels like we could do something more proactive than we have done to date on this. So I would love to hear your guys' thoughts, or whether there's any sort of work about aligning the procurement strategy in this way on this front, because it still feels to me like we haven't really figured this piece out.
So I'll respond to that because my department is the one that procures these. So everything we do is under 149 or 149A, CM at risk, which is filed sub-bid and DCAM certification. So one of the things that we did early on with the supply diversity team was, when they certified a business, to also look and separate, make sure they're DCAM certified, because I feel like that's the struggle, is getting that certification. There's also, we require 100% performance and payment bond on all of our projects. So I think some of the smaller companies, I had those and with talking with them, that's the challenge. So finding a pathway for opportunity is something that myself and the supply diversity team are working on, because of the, we actually just put out a pilot program for the Court Street renovation, which is a large construction project. And, because we have to follow the statute, which is 149 for these ARP, and windows would be they're classified as a filed sub-bid under the statute. So in the statute, the filed sub-bid law does not allow for a joint venture. So if someone wanted to, they have to use the forces within with who they contract with. So whoever bids the work has to do the work. They couldn't, we have a little more flexibility with some other, like with the larger GCs, to do a joint venture. And some firms are doing that. CM firms are doing that now. But with filed sub-bid work, which is the bulk of the work, if you have like chapter, the general conditions is what the GC or the CM has, and that's minimal compared to what the filed sub-bid trades have. So if you had a project that's worth $67 million, out of that 67, typically 60 of it would be filed sub-bid trade work, 7 would be the GC and what they can bid without having to go through the 149 filed sub-bid statute. So there are a lot of challenges to that, but we are working on looking for some pathways for opportunities. And not just recently, we've been meeting with them for 10 months.
Yeah, no, I understand, and I was at the Housing Authority before this, so I do understand the sort of distinction and the challenges we have. There's not a lot of wiggle room with filed sub-bids. I guess what it means, though, is sort of like that we would need to do the thing itself. Like, it would be great if we just could, as a city, support, for instance, like the emergence of a really excellent Black-owned roof replacement group in Boston, right, that could compete on the filed sub-bid level and, and could meet all of our requirements. And I just feel like it feels hard, but it actually feels like easier to me than some of these more like multi-partner projects. Like, yes, you can joint venture them, but the actual amount of the capital and the work that in the joint venture is then going into, say, the Black community is not that large necessarily, but it just feels like we know we've got this steady stream. And the funny thing about these projects is they're sort of like small and simple, but they're actually like substantial, right? Like there's a lot, like where there's many millions of dollars going into these, and they could be like a really steady line of work for someone to just have a great local business employing Bostonians in. So I just want to emphasize that it feels to me like specifically the ARP program, and because it's pretty stable and we expect the state to keep operating a lottery and keep funding projects like this, like it just feels like something you could build a business on. So I just want to re-enter my plea on that front.
Ms. Ford?
I just wanted to just add to that situation. In our procurement process, when we do have bidders come in, we do equitably require them to have a dispersion of staff based upon diversity. So that is something that is addressed somewhat in the procurement process, but again, to your point, not as much. And just in addition to that, the work on roof, boilers, and windows, it actually never stops. And even though we wait for these giant submissions to the MSBA and other IRP projects, the ongoing work is we're most likely replacing a boiler today, right? And we're making patches on roofs because it rained yesterday or it rained in the evening. So the work is still ongoing every day as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and thank you. Really, I mean, I think the BPS capital plan is so important, and I really appreciate you guys all working on it, and I appreciate the effort to try to knit the city and BPS planning on this front more closely together. I think that's really important to succeeding, and I would just ask that you keep the council in that loop, as the chair alluded, because ultimately it's like it's us who have to vote to indebt the city. It's the same vote whether it's a BPS thing or a city hall side thing, and I just think this is getting this capital plan right and making sure that we're in the position to, as aggressively as possible, use the MSBA opportunities, whether you're talking about ARP and core. It's just really, really important. So please just take my questions as an indication of how important I think the work that you do is. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Council Bach. You literally took my last question. But I did want to hear about the demographics. Do you have a requirement? Do you have some sort of metric of what you hire or what you look for?
I don't actually have the information in front of me now, but there is a percentage required of the vendors that we use to have local residents, residents of color, and living in different areas as well. So I can't really elaborate on that right now. I'd have to get more information and get back to you.
Okay, good enough. I think the last emphasis that I want to make is on the community engagement or family engagement. This is a huge change, and even a small transitional change like this can cause disruption, especially with children that are challenged or have difficulty with transition. Then parents need to know how to prepare for that as well, and I didn't hear a lot about that today, and I know that we're here specifically on approving a thing, but would love to see more of what does that look like in terms of how do you prepare families to move from one building to another. So it's not just the children going from here's the new address, but how are we actually preparing them so that there's that home-school connection and understanding of how preparing children.
I think that the presentation that we're planning on doing for May 31st will definitely have those details in it, Counselor, so that we're able to make sure that we give you the detailed information as to how that happened, how do we communicate, and how do we work with our family and community engagement team in terms of how that process happens. It's not, we are doing a lot of communication, a lot of letters, a lot of meetings, and want to make sure that the presentation and the information I give you is the accurate one. So I'm hoping that on the 31st, we have a good amount of information that we'll present to the council, and you guys will be, I hope, be satisfied with what we have to present to you.
All right. Well, we'll be seeing much of each other in the next few weeks,
Yes, we will.
or a week or so, two. Thank you so much for your presentation and responses. If we have no further questions, is there anyone? No? We have no one waiting for public testimony. Thank you so much, and this meeting's adjourned.